Hello. Welcome to Kindly Neurodivergent with Kay. This show is to spend quality time with each other, kindly discussing the similarities and wide range of differences we experience. The experiences we discuss on this show are for educational purposes only. Please do not substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Before we begin, I respectfully request that if you witness any pauses during this show, please continue watching. I'm composing a spontaneous comment or question, letting the guest process their thoughts, in addition to someone repeating something that was unintelligible or misunderstood. It is natural discourse, and we can choose not to say anything while this is occurring. Today I have Debbie Kosior, the Disability and Accessibility Services Campus Lead at Connecticut State Community College Tunxis Campus, with me, to discuss the Office for Disability and Accessibility Services at college. I have known her since 2017 when I first started working with the office at Tunxis to set up supports and accommodations for my classes. Debbie has worked in various capacities in the field of disability services since 2010. She is the current campus lead for disability and accessibility services at Connecticut State Tunxis and has served in this role since July 2021. Debbie holds a Master of Science in Disability Services and Higher Education from CUNY School of Professional Studies, as well as a Bachelor of Science in Quantitative Analysis from St. John's University. She is passionate about helping students find their voice as they increase their confidence, self-advocacy skills, and gain independence in their college endeavors. Welcome, Debbie.
Thank you so much, Kayla. I am so excited to be here and so honored that you asked me to do this interview with you. So I think this is a perfect topic. Lots of students are confused about the process of disability services in post-secondary education. And I think there's a lot of information out there that might be confusing to folks. So I'm happy to answer these questions and hopefully provide a little bit more clarity on the process.
Yeah.
And yes, the fact that I've known you for, what is it, 7 years now, you're almost done, I think, aren't you? You have maybe a handful of classes left, right?
I'm more do it for growth.
Good. You've been doing great here.
I could do it forever.
You sure can. A forever learner. I think that's the best thing to be, right? Always learning something new.
Please introduce yourself.
Well, what else could I say? Like you mentioned, my name is Debbie Kosior, and I am the campus lead for Disability and Accessibility Services here at CT State Tunxis. I've known you for 7 years. I've been in this role now for the past 3 years, but I've been doing this work for over 14 years now. And like you mentioned, I love seeing students grow and and change and gain confidence as they go through college. When they meet with me, that very first day, they're and see them evolve and change, and then see them up on stage receiving their diploma or certificate, or just even coming and just taking classes, semester after semester, and just seeing the confidence they gain in themselves. It is the best thing in the world. So I love doing what I do. So yeah, thank you, Kayla. Thanks for letting me be here.
What is the Office of Disability and Accessibility Services?
So that's the office at CT State Community College, where students with disabilities can obtain disability-related accommodations and supports. Um, every college, every university will have a disability services office. They all might call it something a little bit different. There's lots of different variations of the name. Some places call it disability services, others call it accessibility services. Here at CT State, we take the best of both worlds, and we have called it the Office for Disability and Accessibility Services. So it's the place where if a student has a diagnosed disability and they need some extra support or accommodations, this is the office that's going to help them.
What qualifies someone to receive services under your office?
So for a student to receive disability services in post-secondary ed, they need to have a diagnosed disability as defined by the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. So if a student qualifies under that, they have documentation from a qualified professional. They're going to supply all of that information to us in our office, and then we're going to be able to qualify them for various services, supports, and accommodations based on how their disability may impact them in their classes and on the campus and in their education.
How different are college and high school accommodations and services?
Yeah, so there are some big differences between high school and college, very big differences. And I think lots of times students don't realize, they think that, I had an IEP or an individualized education plan in high school, and that's going to stick with me, and I'm going to have those same accommodations in college. It doesn't work like that, right? And it's because the law changes. So when students are in high school, they're covered under the IDEA. So the IDEA allows like significant modifications to programs. It's special education, right? So students are able to have that special education, modifications to the curriculum, changes to maybe the program or to the coursework that they have to do. When they graduate from high school, those plans terminate, right? So they're going to terminate after high school graduation, and then when they start in college, now they're covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. That shift now changes what types of accommodations a student may receive. So where in high school, they may have been able to have modifications to classes and coursework and grading. In college, we're not necessarily making modifications to a program or a degree or a certificate program, but we're putting in place accommodations that provide the student with equal access, right? So we're leveling out the playing field so the student will have equal access to whatever the coursework is or whatever that education is that they need. So those are the big changes, right? So college, it's providing reasonable accommodations that don't substantially change or alter or modify grading or assignments or exams. So that's the big difference.
In school, I had a professional therapies. and feeding and fire evacuation plan, access to a laptop or desktop, adaptive keyboard and joystick velcroed down on an appropriate table height for my wheelchair, a paper and book stand, and extra time as needed.
Yeah, so that was in high school. And I feel like a lot of yours though, Kayla, a lot of those accommodations kind of are very similar in for you in college, right? You have extra time.
College accommodation letter. I have double time for assessments, access to a note taker, a scribe for written assessments, accessible furniture and classroom, and verbal participation alternatives. I want to shout out my mom for being my personal care attendant at college when we used to commute to in-person classes from fall of 2017 to fall of 2019. I was already taking an online class when COVID hit because I was in the transition program at high school 3 days a week and couldn't find an in-person class that matched my transition schedule without changing everything again. I say again because I switched my fall 2019 schedule after I finally, and very bravely, tackled Intro to College English. Despite my initial placement, which placed me into the 6 credit section of this course, which had extra support built in, after taking the first day writing assignment, my professor astoundingly informed me that I would do fine in the 3 credit version of her course, Intro to College Reading and Writing, which I did.
Nice job, Kayla. You proved that placement test wrong, didn't you? Did just great. You didn't need that extra support. You did fantastic in that class. The placement test, although not perfect, it does give a starting point for some. So in your case, yeah, in your case, it wasn't the best placement. But I'm glad your instructor was able to realize that on the first day and get you moved out into the other course so that you were able to still keep your schedule somewhat the same.
Can you talk about that?
Can I talk about what is it, the placement? Placement, yeah. Placement's changed quite a bit since you took it, because I think you took it, that was pre-COVID, right? Pre-COVID, we had a placement test, we had a math placement exam, we had an English placement exam. And then COVID happened, right? And things kind of changed because students weren't able to come to campus to take that placement exam. So the way we were placing students changed at that point. So we were using multiple measures to try to determine what level course a student might best fit into. And I think it's changed again even since then. So the standard test that you took pre-pandemic is definitely different than what they're even using now.
I had to because I didn't take the SAT.
Yeah, so back then they were still using the SATs to figure out placement for students. So yeah, that was part of the factors that played into you taking that placement exam.
What are accommodations for the placement test?
Yeah, so if a student needs accommodations for a placement exam, that is absolutely something that we're able to get in place. Um, when we had the placement test, the way it was years back, it had you were able to have as much time as you needed. And again, like I said, I think it's changed even since then. So um, students are able to take it. It's an online test right now. They're able to do it either here, they're able to do it even from home. So yeah, but if there are certain accommodations that a student needs to be able to do that, that is absolutely something that our office here is able to help them with.
Why is it the student's responsibility to register with your office rather than how the public school system does it?
Yeah, so when a student's in high school, right? I know it's very common, their parents are very involved, their caregivers, they're legally able to participate in that whole process of making sure that everything is in place for that student. When the student graduates and now they're in college, the student's now an adult, right? So that responsibility now transfers to the student. There's also enact the FERPA, so the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, that protects a student's privacy. So in college, a student's privacy is protected under that act. So the student is responsible for really, uh, I'm gonna, let's say, driving that car, right? So they're driving that ship, and they're making sure that whatever it is that they want in place, it's basically it's their wishes. Um, Parents can be involved, but a student has to provide their parent, yep, absolutely. But the student has to provide that approval and authorization to allow that parent to be involved in the process and to have access to their educational records and things like that.
How do students register with the office so they can receive disability support and accommodations?
Yeah. So at CT State here, we use a system called Accommodate. So students are able to access that system, and they'll go into that system for the very first time. They're going to provide us with some basic information about themselves, and they're going to complete what's called a disclosure form. And that starts a confidential file with our office. So that form is basically that student telling us, I am a student, I have a disability, and I am looking to have supports and accommodations for my classes. So once we get that information, then we work with the student. We'll make sure that the student provides some documentation as to how their disability impacts them educationally. Once we have all of that, we'll have what's called an intake meeting. And at that intake meeting, we talk a little bit more about how your disability impacts you. Have you ever had accommodations before? Have they helped? What what were some challenges that you experienced, maybe in high school? What are some things that really helped you be successful in your classes? And we talk through a little bit more about what it would be like to be in college and the experience that you might have here and the challenges that you may encounter. Once we have a little bit more information about that, we put together what's called an accommodation letter. And that accommodation letter approves the student for whatever those accommodations are that we're going to have in place for them. That letter is then shared with their instructors, but it's only shared if the student agrees to have that letter sent out. So we do still need the student to say, yep, I want that letter shared with each of my instructors. And that way the instructor then knows that that student is working with our office and that they're approved for whatever those accommodations are. And that way the instructor knows what they need to maybe provide for that student in class. So it all starts basically with submitting your disclosure form through our accommodate system. So that's how you start the whole ball rolling with getting services.
Is tutoring separate from your office?
Tutoring is separate from our office, yes. So tutoring is a completely separate office. However, at CT State Tunxis, my office happens to be located in the Academic Success and Tutoring Center. So I'm basically housed in the same area where tutoring takes place. While we are separate offices, I will say we work very closely together. I do work a lot with students on helping them get tutoring appointments set up, referring them for tutoring if they need it. So we are separate, but we work very closely together because we're all trying to support the student, making sure that they have what they need to be successful in their class and yeah, whatever help it is they need.
What accommodations did I not mention?
What accommodations did you not mention? Well, there's a lot of accommodations out there, right? So the interesting thing about accommodations are it's all individualized. So every student, may have completely different accommodations from one another. You could have two students with the same exact disability, and they may have different accommodations just because their disability impacts them a little bit differently. So while you have double time, you have a scribe, you might have accessible furniture. Other students might have audiobooks. You have audiobooks too, right? Do you? Yeah, okay. What else? They might have deadline extensions. You have deadline extensions, I think, right? Yeah, yeah. So there are a lot of accommodations that could be put in place for students, but it's really just dependent on the student's disability and how it impacts them. So again, we're trying to break down barriers to make sure that that student has the same access as another student without a disability in that class. So sometimes we get creative.
Why isn't it called special education?
Special education. So special education is that is a K through 12 term. So special education essentially means that a student's receiving an individualized curriculum that is maybe different from their peers that don't have disabilities. So students in special ed, when they're in high school, let's say, would have what's called an IEP, so an individualized education plan. And that's similar to what I was saying before, where it really just modifies the program for the student, and it just individualizes it. The focus is on success in high school. So special ed is really just it's all it's all covered under IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It's not special ed when you get to college because, like I mentioned, now it changes. You're not under the IDEA anymore. You're covered under the ADA and Section 504. So special ed allows schools to modify programs, really, change up things for students focused on success. And when you get to college, it is more so breaking down those barriers, providing equal access for the student.
In fall of 2022, I had COVID, then a month later had a medical setback. I didn't reach out to anyone when I tested positive for COVID. However, I emailed you and my two professors to cover my butt the following month. I had to meet with you virtually. Can I please take this moment to share how it is worded in a unique way? I didn't attempt to use this accommodation though. Here's how it is worded. Student may occasionally have difficulty completing an assignment or assessment on time due to unexpected increases in disabling symptoms. To use this accommodation, students will email both the instructor and disability services as soon as they know they will be unable to meet the deadline. The additional length of time is typically 1-2 days. This adjustment may not be appropriate for every assignment, but when appropriate, should be extended and provided without a grading penalty.
Yep, that is our accommodation for deadline extensions. And exactly like you mentioned, you had a medical situation that occurred, right? So you had, things that were evolving and changing with your disability, and it resulted in maybe you not being able to get some things in on time because you were trying to recover from, I think it was a seizure that you had, right? Yeah. So that is a very important accommodation that we have in place specifically for reasons like that, right? You have something that impacts you. You're not able to be focused on getting that assignment in, right? You're focused on getting yourself better. So that accommodation gives a little bit of flexibility, and it provides a little extension, usually 24 to 48 hours. So it could be, that could vary depending on the situation that's occurring. But it is uniquely worded, I know you had mentioned, because it does require some kind of outreach, right? So it's not meant to just push out every assignment due date. It really is only meant to push out assignment due dates in instances where you had a disability related event impacting you. So you hadn't, your symptoms were flaring up, or you had a medical situation that really impacted you. Um, it 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 does get a little bit tricky at times because there are medical situations where a student can't reach out to an instructor and let them know, hey, I'm not able to get this in tonight, right? You could be in the midst of having a medical situation occur. So that's why having me in the mix on that so that I'm able to then help advocate for you is always helpful. So I always tell students to keep me in the mix so that in case something happens and we have this accommodation in place for you and you have a situation that occurs, maybe it's me reaching out to your instructor to say, Kayla is having a situation. Can she please have an extra day or two to get that assignment in?
I didn't feel like I could use it because it doesn't make every deadline different.
It doesn't change all of them, but you can absolutely use that. In a situation like you had, Kayla, you absolutely could have reached out to use that. It's not meant to push, like I said, it's not meant to say, if on your syllabus you have something due every Wednesday, it doesn't maybe say, okay, now instead of you handing it on Wednesday, you hand it in on Friday every week. But if you're having a situation that's impacting you due to your disability, for those assignments or for those papers or whatever that might be, those are the ones that you would then request to have an extra day or two on.
I mean, the domino effect is tricky.
Yeah. And that is why this is such a tricky accommodation. And then that's also why we say that it's 24 to 48 hours of an extension, because once you start pushing it out further, like you said, it's a domino effect, right? So now you're already eating into the next due date, right? And so then it's like, okay, well, now your next due date, instead of having a week on that, now you have 5 days. And then, so then you need an extra day or two for that. So it is a tricky one. And, but it is a very important accommodation also for situations where a student is really being impacted, and it provides you with the equal access to get work completed in time. So if the
That's
whole
why
class has 7 days to do something and you have a medical situation that impacts you for 2 days, well, you just lost 2 days. So we got to get you those 2 days back, right? So that's how this accommodation provides that.
that is why I kept up.
Yeah, you're good with keeping up with your work, I know. But always know that that accommodation is there if you needed it, right? So that's why we have it there for you.
With the merger of all 12 community colleges, what are some things you want to tell current and potential students about the office?
Yeah. So, so the merger actually has been a great thing for students, especially students coming through disability services. And for you, right? It's been a good thing for you too, right? So because of the merger, I mean, it has provided so many more options for classes for students to be able to take, right? So in the past, if you were registered at Tunxus, you were really just taking classes at Tunxus. Now you're taking classes and you're able to see all of, CT State Community College. So you're able to see what's being offered at Norwalk. You're able to see what's being offered at Manchester. You have 11 other campuses that may be offering something that is going to work out great for you. And it's not necessarily that you want to, drive all the way to Norwalk, but they might be offering a live remote option or an online option. I know you like the live remote ones, right? Those are good. That's like the best of both worlds, right? You're able to have an online class, but have that interaction with seeing your instructor and seeing the class. So it's opened up just so many more options for
I have
students.
not taken a Tonks's class since.
I know it's been a while. You have not been on campus since, right? You've been fully virtual. Yeah. And it's been beneficial for you, and you now have so many more options because there are many more campuses that are offering, whether it be live remote or online classes. The other nice thing about it is, as a student that may have an accommodation letter, everything goes through the home campus. So for you, Kayla, your home campus is Tunxus. I'm your lead for any disability related issues, questions, any disability processing. So whether or not you're taking a class at Tunxus or at one of the other 11 campuses, I'm the one that's sending out your accommodation letter. I'm the one that's reaching out and connecting with those instructors if there is an issue or a question or anything else. So you still have your one support person, but it provides you the ability to just have me communicate that out to any of the other instructors at any campus.
Naugatuck Valley for 2 semesters.
Oh, okay. So you took a couple of classes there? Good. Home? Yeah.
Live.
What was that? I missed it.
Live remote.
Okay.
Thank you, Debbie, for doing this with me.
Oh,
It was
thank you,
great to
Kate.
have you on.
It was
Please share this talk show with your family, friends, students, and colleagues. Everyone watching, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and share on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.